Welcome back, everyone. This is the Commander Kid. Today what we're going to do is a full set review of all the new Commander precons. This is going to be from the new Capenna. This is an amazing set. I'm so stoked to be able to go through all of them. We're going to go through every single last one of them all at the same time. It's going to be a big undertaking, but if we get it done, you'll be able to get a nice quick comparison. Maybe find the one that you would like to buy for this round. You get the 5 new crime families. We have the Obscura, we have the Maestros, we have the Riveteers, the Cabaretti, and the Brokers. Walk you through what you get in a box. This is slightly different from some of the other ones that we've got in the past. It's a little bit more expensive, but in every box you're going to get this collector booster sample pack. And I believe there's 2 cards in here. You'll get that, a player's guide, just a divider. You'll get the pack with the extra thick commander inside, and then you'll get the full deck on the other side. And lastly, a little life counter. You'll notice that with every deck, there is 2 different versions. You can see this one's a little bit darker. Even like the text box is darker. It's got the thicker style card, but they've printed it in a slightly different finish, which makes it pretty cool and unique. And they've done that treatment with all 5 of the decks. Brokers have 2 different commander types that you can play with. You have Piri the Pulverizer. When Piri the Pulverizer enters the battlefield, put a shield counter on target creature. And then whenever Piri attacks, target creature you control gains trample and gets XX. X is the number of different kinds of counters among permanents you control. The same deck you can also play Cross, the defense contractor. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a shield counter on target creature an opponent controls. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature you don't control, tap that creature and goad it. It gains trample until your next end turn. So these are pretty cool. They have nice synergies with each other. Quite nice for the broker deck. Next up for the Cabaretti, we have Kitty Kanto Mayhem Diva. When Kitty Kanto enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green and white citizen token. And at the beginning of combat on each player's turn, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control. When you do, target creature that player controls gets +2/+2 and gains trample until the end of turn. Goad that creature. Then we get Fabian, Boss is Confident. Creature tokens you control have haste. Really nice. Parlay at the beginning of a combat on your turn. Each player reveals the top card of the library. For each land card revealed this way, you create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. Then creatures you control get +1/+1 to end of turn for each non-land card revealed this way. Then each player draws a card. Alright, also really nice commanders in this deck as well. Kind of play off of each other, and you can see how both of them could be included in the deck. Right, with the Riveteers, we have Henzi, the Toolbox Tor. Each creature spell you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz. The Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. And when you Blitz, you may choose to cast that creature cost was Blitz cost. If you do, it gains haste, and when this creature dies, draw a card, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Blitz costs you pay cost 1 less for each time you've cast your commander from the command zone this game. And then this is also a really cool commander. I think he's been talked about quite a lot online, and that's the B-Town Bullies. Vigilance and haste. A target opponent whose turn it is puts a target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under their control, it gains haste. Goad it at the beginning of the next end step, exile it. Really nice. Very interesting, sneaky kind of plays, very different from the other two. From the Maestros deck, we have Anilo, the Painter, Death Touch, and the first instant sorcery Death Touch, and the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn has Casualty 2. And as you cast that spell, you may sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater when you do copy that spell, and you may choose new targets for the copy. Really interesting. And then we have Parnis, the Subtle Blush. We have Parnis, the Subtle Brush. Whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or that ability unless that player pays 4. Very similar to Ward, only it also includes you. So, and Ward does not do that. And then whenever you copy a spell, up to one target opponent may also copy that spell. You may choose new targets for that copy. And then lastly, we have the Obscura with Kamez, which says whenever you attack target, attacking creature can't be blocked this turn. It convenes. You may choose another attacking creature with lesser power. That creature gains double strike until end of turn. And then we have Tivit, the Seller of Secrets, flying, ward 3, and it's got Council's Dilemma. Whenever Tivit enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, starting with you, each player votes for evidence or bribery. For each evidence vote, investigate. For each bribery vote, create a treasure token. And while voting, you may vote an additional time. Alright, so commanders down. Let's dive into the nitty gritty, starting with the lands. Alright, so this is a breakdown of all the lands. I believe every one of these decks has very similar land count, all between 37 and 38 lands. Each of them come with a unique land named after their specific crime family. So this is the Broker's Hideout. They all effectively have the same ability, just with the colors that are relevant to that specific crime, to the specific family house colors. And that will be, so for the Brokers, that's going to be Bant, so that's going to be looking for forest, plains, and island cards. Note these are basics, but when it enters, you sacrifice it immediately. When you do, you go search for it, and you shuffle and gain a life. Now, all of these do that. You'll notice that in this specific deck, there's quite a nice chunk of cards that add the 2 different colors. Any color that your opponent can control, which is really nice. These filter lands are really great. I'm so happy they're including these now. You'll notice that some utility cards that are going to be adding counters, which is what you want in that deck. More color fixing. Quite a nice healthy chunk of like your rare and unique lands. And then moving into your more common lands, you'll find your Command Tower, a few other utility type cards, and then eventually a few basics. What I've also noticed is within each of the decks, you get now one of each full art land. They don't give you all full art lands, and I think that's to sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink, encourage you to go and buy those for the deck. Okay, so that's Brokers. The Cabaretti Courtyard, you can see it goes and fetches the same things, but also like its predecessor, you find a nice complement of rare lands, also filter lands, which is great, hideaway lands, slightly different within each one, so there's a little bit of uniqueness there. Once again, some basics with 3 full arts. The Riveteers, or the Jun deck, you'll go fetch the swamp, mountain, and forest. Also had quite a nice complement of your rarer lands, also with filtering. I mean, Twilight Mire, I believe, is at around $8 as of the recording of this, so quite a nice land. So within value. And then your basics and nice full arts. Now these two, the Maestros and the Obscura, their complement wasn't as good, although they did have some unique, interesting lands. But as you saw, that's a much smaller complement than some of the other decks, and then a few additional utility creature lands, and then a little bit more than the average in terms of basics. And then with the Obscura, you'll notice that Creeping Tar Pit was really great modern when I was playing it back in the day, so I'm interested to see that they've added it here. Just a few lands, a few sort of utility cards, and then also quite a large complement of basics. Alright, so in terms of lands, I think it definitely comes out quite strong with really good mana fixing within these three, and a little bit to work with these. Not that it's lacking in any way. I kind of feel that for all these three decks, these mana bases have been built really nice. These new instant fetch lands are really nice. How well they get used, it's up for debate. I think it still thins out your deck, allows you to go and fetch immediately for what you need, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of like reoccurring effects for these type of lands that we're going to see a lot of really nice utility from them. Alright, so now let's get into the less exciting stuff, so all the reprints in each of the decks. Okay, cool. There you have it. These are all the new unique cards, and these are all the reprints. And it's quite easy to see that there's very few new cards, 2 reprints per set. Let's go through these reprints. So I think many of these you will be able to find anyways. They've been printed recently. Some of them have been printed a few times. And these are ones that kind of make up the deck. Some of these are going to fit really nicely, but I think a lot of us would already know these. I'm going to just go through them. Incubation Druid is really good. As a mana dork that sort of becomes more valuable over time. Rishkar is really good. Rishkar's Expertise is really good. Scavenging Ooze is really good in multiple formats as well. Borel is really, really nice. The Oblivion Stone. Your Devoted Druid is also quite expensive at the moment because of some of the other cards that have been recently printed. King Signet, Commander Sphere, Felwar Stone, Soul Ring, Swiftfoot Boots. Not a huge amount in here that is very exciting. You can definitely see that they've gone for the token themes, which is quite cool, especially with the 1/1 tokens. Lost the support for that in Magic already. Next up, we have the Cabaretti. Duelist's Heritage is really good. Felder Treats is also very good. A couple board wipes. Kazul has been wanting a reprint for a long time, and I'm happy he's in here. Beastmaster Ascension is also really great. Sandworm Convergence is a nice end-game card. For 8 mana you can get it quite quickly, but it just really gives you a lot of value over time. Scoot Swarm is very dangerous. Assemble the Legion, also another card that over a period of time becomes like the biggest threat. Savala Explorer Returned is a great card. Parlay is a really fantastic ability. Cabaretti Charm is new. Path of Exile, Beast Within, Cultivate, Steve, Wood Elves, Burrows Charm, Arcane Signet, and a few other support rocks. This is quite a decent set. I think these cards are quite nice. There's definitely more that will probably stick around from this. Alright, next up is Riveteers. From Riveteers, some very interesting sort of like answers to many of these decks. You'll find that there's going to be a lot of tokens, a lot of counters, and so this is going to be quite an interesting card, even though I think in general it's probably not as valuable, but against these decks probably quite nice. Chaos Swap is really good. Entirely, Avenger of Zendikar is really nice. Giant Ediphage, Evolutionary Leap, Life's Legacy is really great. Woodfall Primus, Crash is really nice, very interesting in this deck too. Wind Grace's Judgment is also quite a great removal card. Lots of really nice ramping spells, which are nice, cool for this deck. You want to have quite a lot of ramp. Team of Sabertooth to blink and bounce to get reoccurring value, and then a couple support cards. So overall, Riveteer is also quite a nice balance of cards that will probably stick around in the deck, and a few cards that you could trade out. Alright, Maestros. Maestros has Clone Legion, which is also quite a nice finisher. Really big, beefy spells, as you can see. Lots of like really expensive spells. X is going to be very large, and that's because there's a lot of like spell reduction cards in here. So a lot of like really impactful spells. Rekindling Phoenix is a really nice card. Glad they've added it here. Kess as a reprint is also a really nice card. Very powerful commander. And McFat as well. McFat deters quite a lot of different strategies, so I'm glad that's in here. Lots of like very well seen and understood spells for black. Removal of enchantment is really cool. Very, very useful. And then a lot of artifact ramp. Right, we have the Obscura. In Obscura we have Sun Titan, reprinted quite a lot. Chasm Stalker also does some really interesting things with going wide. Drana, Custody Lich, interesting cards that we haven't seen in a while. Elia, very powerful commander too, sees a lot of play already. Silent Blade Online is also very good. It's seeing a lot of play because of some of the really nice support for ninjas recently, and so it's been played a lot. Rixels also hasn't been seen a reprint in a while, and it's also increased in value a little bit. Quiet as Spike is great. Draconic Resignator with a new artwork. And then also a very large support package when it comes to artifact ramp. Alright, so what I'm definitely seeing is some themes here. These two are quite close to each other. Both of them have very similar land packages. Both of them have very similar sort of support packages. These three I think are going to play in a very similar way. These two I think are going to play in a very similar way. Alright, the Brokers. These are some of the new cards that are coming out. Some of these are going to be exclusive to these Commander Precons. Others will be also included in the new Streets of New Capenna, which is going to be something that some of these will be able to collect, I think. Angelic Sleuth. It's a 3-mana 2/3 flying whenever another permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, investigate. Really nice. Contractual Safeguard. For 3 mana, it has addendum. If you cast this spell during your main phase, put a shield counter on target creature you control. Choose a kind of counter on a creature you control, put a counter of that kind on each other creature you control. Also really nice, so if you have like a shield counter, you could protect your board from a board wipe. Really nice. Damning Verdict, destroy all creatures with no counters on them. I like these removal spells that have that additional sort of condition for your specific strategy so that your stuff stays safe, and it's sort of not exactly a linear sort of effect. Resourceful Defense. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on target permanent you control. Move any number of counters from target permanent you control to another target permanent you control. Really, really powerful card. I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be one of the star cards of the set. You can do a whole bunch of shenanigans, from moving loyalty tokens over to counters over to other permanents, or 1/1 counters, so if something is targeted and is about to destroy, you don't lose any of that value. So if somebody holds back that 5 mana, it's really, really interesting to see, and that's really cool for some like really sneaky shenanigans, right? Because it can be cast at instant speed, so if you're attacking with a whole bunch of creatures and then some get blocked before damage is dealt, you can move all those counters over to the unblocked creatures and do some real serious stuff. Skyboon Evangelist. When it enters the battlefield, supports 6, put 6 1/1 counters on it, and whenever a creature with a counter on it attacks one of your opponents, that creature gains flying until end of turn. Haven Courier, it's a 1/1 for 2 with flying. Whenever it attacks, choose a counter on a permanent you control, put a counter of that kind on target permanent you control if it doesn't have a counter of that kind on it. So yeah, kind of similar to what we've seen already. Shield Broker is really great. Gives when Shield Broker enters the battlefield, put a shield counter on the target non-commander creature you don't control and gain control of that creature as long as it has a shield counter on it for 5 mana. And so that's really, really interesting. You could probably blink this over and over and sort of get a lot of your opponent's really valuable creatures and make it really, really tough for people to remove them. Storm of Forms, it's a 4 mana instant. You can cast a spell, copy it for each kind of counter among permanents you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. Return non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Very interesting. Storm counters. So, quite a cool card. Bribery Taker. It's trample 6/6 for 6. And when Bribery Tanker enters the battlefield, for each kind of counter on permanents you control, you may, of your choice, put a 1/1 counter or a counter of that kind on Bribe Taker. Really interesting. You can make this thing real big as well. It'd be really interesting with some of those other ability counters like haste, which would make this really, really scary. Family Favor. Whenever you attack, put a shield counter on target attacking creature until end of turn. Again, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, remove shield counter from it if you do draw a card. Park Heights Maverick. Dethrone. Whenever Park Heights Maverick can't be blocked by creatures with 2 or less, and whenever Park Heights Maverick deals combat damage to a player or dies, proliferate. Really interesting in lots of different decks. Agent's Toolkit. When it enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it, a flying counter, a dethrone counter, and a shield counter on it. Sorry, death touch counter. And whenever a creature you control enters the battlefield under your control, you may move a counter from Agent's Toolkit onto that creature. This is really, really interesting because it gives those extra abilities, and so you can do some really nice things with it. You can also then sacrifice it later to draw a card. Broker's Confluence. It's for 5 mana. You may choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Proliferate. Target creature phases out. Target activated or triggered ability counter. Sorry. Target activated or triggered ability. Alright, Broker's Confluence. You may choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Proliferate. You may have a target creature phase out or target counter target activated or triggered ability. Denry Killen, Editor-in-Chief. Denry Killen, Editor-in-Chief, enters the battlefield with your choice of the 1/1 counter, first strike, or vigilance counter. Whenever a non-token creature you control enters the battlefield, if Denny has counters on it, put the same number and counter counters onto that creature. Gravel the Righteous. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a charge counter on Gravel the Righteous. Equipped creature gets 1/1 for each counter on Gravel the Righteous, as long as Gravel of the Righteous has 4 or more counters on the equipped creature has double strike. Equip, pay 3, or remove a counter from Gravel of the Righteous. 2, and it has that equip for pay 3. Quite nice. Avenging Huntbonder. Double strike. Whenever Avenging Huntbonder attacks, put a double strike counter on another target creature. Very scary, but it is for 5 mana. Sorcery for 2 is Declaration in Stone. Exile target creature and all other creatures its controllers. Exile target creature and all other creatures its controller controls with the same name as that creature. Then player investigates for each non-token creature exiled this way. Quite strange. Now you're going to have to do some things to change the names. Broker's Charm. Choose 1. You can have target creature you control get 1+0 until end of turn. It deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. Which is really nice. It doesn't fight it. It just deals that damage. And then destroy target enchantment or draw 2 cards. Exotic Pets, quite a cute looking card. Create 2 1/1 blue fish creature tokens with this creature can't be blocked. Then for each counter among creatures you control, put a counter of that kind on either of those tokens. Alright, for the Cabaretti, you have the Cabaretti Charm. It deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or player. You can have creatures you control get 1/1 and gain trample until end of turn. And you can create 2 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Quite a lot of interesting things you can do at instant speed. We have the Boss Chauffeur. The Boss Chauffeur enters the battlefield with a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to 1 plus the number of other creatures you control. With Alliance, you can, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Boss's Chauffeur. When Boss's Chauffeur dies, create 1/1 green and white citizen creature token for each 1/1 counter on it. The Grand Crescendo. Create X 1/1 white and green creature citizen tokens. Creatures you control gain indestructible until the end of turn. Also at instant speed with X. So even if you just put double white into it, you'll still have creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Master of Ceremonies. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent chooses money, friends, or secrets. For each player who chooses money, you and that player each create a treasure token. For each player that chooses friends, you and that player creates a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. And for each player who chooses secrets, you and that player each draw a card. Really cool white card. 3/4. It will live through a bolt for 4 mana. I think this will see quite a lot of play. Indulge and Excess. Indulge is whenever a creature you control attacks this turn, create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token, tapped and attacking. And Excess is Aftermath, so you can cast a spell only from your graveyard. then exile it, and you can create a treasure token for each creature you control that dealt combat damage to a player this turn, for only 2 mana. I really like this card. I think it's got lots of gas as well, lots of legs in Commander. Life of the party. It's got first strike, trample, and haste. Whenever life of the party attacks, it gets +X/+0 until the end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. When life of the party enters the battlefield, if it's not a token, each opponent creates a token that's a copy of it. The tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. I really, really like this card. It's a 0/1 for 4, and that gives you just a hint to how much power this thing could have. I think this is probably one of my favorite cards in all of the precons so far. It's something I would like to see played quite a lot. It's not necessarily the most powerful card, but lots of fun there. Rose Room Treasurer. Rose Room Treasurer has Alliance. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a treasure token. If this ability is the first or second time this ability has resolved this turn, otherwise you may pay X. When you do, Rose Room Treasurer deals X damage to any target. Seize the Spotlight. For 3 mana for sorcery, each opponent chooses Fame or Fortune. For each player who chooses Fame, gain control of a creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures and they gain haste until end of turn. For each player who chooses Fortune, you may draw a card and then create a treasure token. Very interesting card. Crash the Party. Create a tapped 4/4 green rhino warrior creature for each tapped creature you control at instant speed for 6 mana. This will definitely catch you off guard if you have lots of tokens or tokens going wide. People swinging into you thinking that you're tapped out, and then all of a sudden you make a boatload of rhinos. Killer Service is a 3 mana enchantment, and it says when Killer Service enters the battlefield, create a number of food tokens equal to the number of opponents you have. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 2 and sacrifice a token if you do create a 4/4 rhino warrior creature token. Very cool. I like the fact that rhinos are in the Riveteers. Makes sense. They're like building the city, and rhinos are really cool and strong. Scepter of Celebration. Crypt creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. And whenever a crypt creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. 6 mana for Vivian Stampede. Each creature you control gains Vigilance, Trample, and Melee until end of turn. At the beginning of your next main phase this turn, draw a card for each player who was dealt damage this turn. I think that's really relevant when it gives this thing Trample, and Melee can make your stuff real big. I think this is also going to be a card that's going to see some play in some decks that want to use this as like a way to bust through. Bess, Soul Nurturer. Bess is really good. I think she's going to see a lot of play, and I think I'm going to see a lot of this in my pods that I usually play with. Base has whenever one or more other creatures with base power and toughness 1/1 enter the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Bess, and then whenever Bess attacks, each other creature you control with base power and toughness 1/1 gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of 1/1 counters on Bess. There are a lot of 1/1 base counters, and I believe even if you modify it with tokens, it's still a base power 1/1, and so she's going to see a lot of play in some, and a lot of unique cards are going to come out and work really well with Bess. Cabaretti Confluence. Choose 3, may choose the same mode more than once. Creature token, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. It gains haste. Sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. Exile target artifact or enchantment. Creatures target player controls get +1/+1 and gain first strike until end of turn. It's really expensive, but it has a few interesting effects. Prosperous Partnership for 3. When it enters the battlefield, you may create 2 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Tap 3 untapped untapped creatures you control and create a treasure token. I think this is also going to see a lot of play. There's going to be some interesting things, like tapping your creatures and then bouncing something to untap your creatures to make more treasures. I think this card will probably have a future in some combo decks. We'll see. False Floor. False Floor enters the battlefield tapped. Creatures enter the battlefield tapped. And you can exile the False Floor and exile all untapped creatures activate only as a sorcery. This is really nice because you can swing out, have all your creatures be tapped, and then exile everything else. Alright, for the Copper Coats, it's a 3-mana Strive card. This spell costs 2 more to cast for each target beyond the first. Now choose any number of target opponents, create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. Very cool. Alright, with the Riveteers, we have the Bellowing Mauler. At the beginning of your end step, each player loses 4 life unless they sacrifice a non-token creature. Great. Protection Racket. At the beginning of your upkeep, repeat the following process for each opponent in turn order. Reveal the top card of your library. That player may pay life equal to that card's mana value. If they do, exile that card, otherwise put it into your hand. Wave of Rats. Wave of Rats dies. If it deals combat damage to a player this turn, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. And it has Trample for 4/2. Really beefy rat. And it has Blitz for 5. Industrial Advancement. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is that creature's value. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Very, very interesting in red, and you can probably bust out some really mean stuff because it's any creature. It doesn't have to match that mana value. So you could sacrifice a, like if you're lucky, you could sacrifice like a 1-drop and get an Eldrazi. Mesomega. Whenever the Mesomega attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. You may play those cards this turn, and you may spend mana as though any mana of any color to cast those spells. And it's got Blitz. It's like it's highly light, so quite nice. Rain of Riches. When Rain of Riches enter the battlefield, create 2 treasure tokens. The first spell you cast each turn, that mana from a treasure was spent to cast has Cascade. Rain of Riches. When Rain of Riches enters the battlefield, create 2 treasure tokens. So it's for 5, so it's kind of reducing itself a little bit. The first spell you cast each turn, that mana from a treasure was spent to cast it has Cascade. That's bonkers, because that's going to stick around. So if you're playing a lot of treasure sort of effects, you want this card. Turf War. When Turf War enters the battlefield, for each player, put a contested counter on target land that player controls. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, if that player controls 1 or more lands with contested counters on them, that creature's controller gains control of one of those lands of their choice and untaps it. That's going to make for really confusing board states. I'm not a really big fan of people passing around cards and having you hold on to cards that belong to somebody else, just in case one of them gets shuffled in and changes homes. We have the Caldalio Guardian. Whenever the Caldalio Guardian or another creature you control with mana 4 or greater dies, create 2 1/1 green and white citizen tokens. Really interesting. I'm sure with some reanimator effects this is going to be really good. And it has Blitz for 3. And then we have Dodgy Jalopy as a vehicle for 3, and it has trample whenever the dodgy Jalopy power is equal to the highest mana value among creatures you control. It has crew 3 and scavenge 3, so you can exile this from your graveyard and put a number of 1/1 counters equal to the card's power onto target creature. That's really, really powerful. First Responder, for 3 mana you get a 3/3 with Vigilance, and at the beginning of your end step you may return another creature you control to its owner's hand and then put a number of 1/1 counters equal to that creature's power on First Responder. Next, a Kin, for 3 mana you get an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Your enchanted creature dies, you may put a creature card you own from with lesser mana value from your hand onto the commander zone, or from the command zone onto the battlefield. If you do, return next Kin onto the battlefield attached to that creature at the beginning of your next end step. Grimegorger, Menace, for 3/3 for 4, and when Grimegorger attacks, exile up to 1 card of each card type from defending player's graveyard. Put a 1/1 counter on Grimegorger for each card exiled this way. It's like a Scavenging Ooze ++. You have Jolene, the Plunder Queen. It's a 4 mana 2/2, and whenever a player attacks one or more of your opponents, that attacking player creates a treasure token. If you were to create 1 or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token, sacrifice 5 treasures, put 5 1/1 counters on Jolene. And we have Riveteer's Confluence. It's a 5 mana sorcery. You can choose 3, and you may choose the same mode more than once. You may draw a card and you lose 1 life. You may have Riveteer's Confluence deal 1 damage to each creature and each player you don't control, and you may put a land card from your hand or the graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Really interesting. I think the land thing is really relevant. Getting back, if you were to do this 3 times, get 3 back, 3 lands that are going to go fetch out more lands. Really, really cool. We have Weathered Sentinels. It's a 3 mana 2/5. It's got Defender, Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. And Weathered Sentinels can attack players who attacked you during their last turn, although it didn't have Defender, and because it is a wall. And when Weathered Sentinels attacks, it gets +3/+3 and gains indestructible until end of turn. We have the Riveteer's Charm. You may choose 1 target opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker they control with the highest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. Exile the top 3 cards of your library until your next end step. You may play those cards, or you may exile target player's graveyard. Next up, we have the Maestros, Extravagant Replication. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of another target non-land permanent you control for 6 mana. It's going to do some really crazy things because it can create a copy of pretty much anything for 6. Flawless Forgery. It's a 5 mana sorcery. It has casualty 3, so as you cast a spell, you may sacrifice a creature with 3 or more power, and when you do, you can copy the spell, and you may choose new targets. And the ability is exile target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard, copy that spell, and you may cast a copy without paying its mana cost. So you could possibly get 2 copies. Sinister Concierge. When Sinister Concierge dies, you may exile it and put 3 time counters on it. If you do, exile up to 1 target creature and put 3 time counters on it. Each card exiled this way that doesn't have a suspend gains suspend. Body Count. It's a 3 mana instant with Spectacle for 1. You may draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn. I think that's going to do some real gross stuff, especially with some cards that can do this like loop, where you sack a creature to an altar and then you can bring it back. You can do that a certain number of times and then cast this. You could pretty much draw most of your library. Dodge Detective. When Dodge Detective enters the battlefield, it's fail 2, and whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you may return Dodge Detective from your graveyard to your hand. Very cool. Also very much like the fact that that almost looks like the Riddler from the new Batman movie. Make an example. For 4 mana, it's a sorcery. Each opponent separates the creatures they control into 2 piles. For each opponent, you may choose one of their piles, and each opponent sacrifices the creatures in their chosen pile. Waste Management. Exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. If the spell was kicked, instead exile target player's graveyard and create a 2/2 black rogue creature for each creature card exiled this way for 3 mana at an instant speed, and it has kicker. That's wild. I think that's really good, especially late game. You can do some gross stuff with people's graveyards. Xander's Pact, Casualty 2, it's 6 mana. Your opponent exiles the top card of their library. You may cast spells from among those cards this turn. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to that spell's mana value, then rather than playing its mana cost. Right, so very similar to Bolas's Citadel, but for your opponent's stuff. Audacious Swap, it's an instant for 4 mana. Casualty 2, the owner of target non-enchantment permanent shuffles it into the library and then exiles the top card of the library. If it's a land card, put it into the battlefield, otherwise they may cast it without paying its mana cost. Okay, this is also very similar to Chaos Swap in some ways. Determined Iteration. At the beginning of combat on your turn, populate these. The token created this way gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step as an enchantment for 2. I really like this card. This would go really great in Greven, because you can copy your opponent's stuff and then sack that to gain, so you gain cards. Really interesting. Spellbinding Soprano. Whenever Spellbinding Soprano attacks, instants and sorcery spells you cast as turn cost 1 less to cast, and has Encore for 4, so 2/2 for 2. Cryptic Pursuit. It's a 4 mana enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, manifest the top card of your library. And whenever a face down creature you control dies, exile it. If it is an instant or sorcery card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. The Maestros Confluence, you can choose 3, you may choose any mode more than once. You may return target monocolored instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. You may get a creature get -3/-3 until end of turn, or you may goad each creature target player controls. Then we have Syrinx, the Carrier of the Flame. It's a Phoenix. It's 4 mana for 3/3. It has flying and haste. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature card left your graveyard this turn, target Phoenix you control deals damage equal to its power to any target, and whenever another Phoenix you control dies, you may cast Syrinx, the Carrier of the Flame, to your graveyard. Really nice commander for Phoenixes. I mean, the black plays nicely into reanimated type effects, and already in the deck, I know that most of the Phoenixes are going to be in red. I don't think there are any Phoenixes in black, but black does have reanimated, which is speaking to what this wants to do. So this might be quite a fun commander that's interesting and different from your standard black and red decks. Smuggler's Buggy. It's a 4 mana 5/5, hideaway 4, quite cool on a vehicle. Whenever Smuggler's Buggy deals combat damage to a player, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. If you do, return Smuggler's Buggy to its owner's hand, so you get to hideaway 4 again and do that stuff. That's quite cool. A Little Chat. For 2 mana, you get an instant C with Casualty 1. It has look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them onto your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library. We also have Cormella, the Glamour Thief. It's a 4 mana 2/4 with haste, and you may pay 1 and tap it to add 3. You can spend this mana to only cast instants or sorcery spells, and when Cormella, the Glamour Thief, dies, return up to 1 target or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. We have the Maestros Charm. For 3 mana you can choose one. Look at the top 5 cards of your library, put one of those cards into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life, or Maestros Charm does 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. As you can see, this is going to be very much like spell based, and yeah, reusing your spells is going to be quite interesting. Right, Obscura. We have Aerial Extortionist. It's a 5 mana 4/3 flying, and whenever Aerial Extortionist deals into the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may cast it. And whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. So you can kind of swing with it, exile a thing, get them to replay it. I think this can be a really annoying card if you copy it a number of times. Jailbreak for 2. It's a sorcery. Return target permanent card in an opponent's graveyard to the battlefield under their control. When that permanent enters the battlefield, return up to 1 target permanent card with equal or lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield. Really nice political card. Smuggler's Share. It's a 3 mana enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn. Then create a treasure token card for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. Wow. For 3 mana. This is going to be a real bomb of a card in the set, I think. This is probably the most powerful card I've seen so far in all 5 decks. That's exactly what White wants to do, is sort of keep everybody in check, and it gives you both treasure and you can draw a card. So it's ramp and draw on a card in White. Very powerful for White. The Cephalid Face Taker. It's a Cephalid Rogue. Cephalid Face Taker can't be blocked. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may have Cephalid Face Taker become a copy of another target creature until end of turn, except that it's 1/4 and that it has this creature can't be blocked. Quite interesting. Change of plans. I just thought to myself, you know how cool this would be with like Master of Cruelties. That's super funny. Change of plans. Each of X target creatures you control convene. You may have any number of them phase out for X and 1 and a blue. Into Deep for 2 mana. It's an enchantment aura. It has split second. That's interesting. Enchant creature, planeswalker, or clue. Enchantment permanent is a colorless clue artifact with 2 sacrifice this artifact to draw a card. It loses all other abilities. That's super funny. I don't get why you would want to target somebody's clue to make it into a clue, but the other 2 effects are quite powerful. Creature or planeswalker. Mask of the Schemer. It's a 3 mana artifact and equipment. Whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, it convenes. X is an amount of damage it's dealt to a player. Draw X cards, and then discard X cards. Very cool. Also for 2 equipped. Skyway Robber. It's a 4 mana 3/3 flying. Also has Escape for 4. And it says Skyway Robber, when it escapes, sorry, just get it to focus. Skyway Robber escapes with whenever Skyway Robber deals combat damage to a player, you may cast an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell from cards exiled this way with Skyway Robber without paying its mana cost. Right. Lethal Scheme. It's 4 mana for Convoke. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Each creature that convoked Lethal Scheme convenes. So you get to loot, and for every non-land card you get to put a 1/1 counter on that creature. Misformed Teller. Death Touch. It's a 4 mana 3/1, and when Misformed Teller enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile target creature card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, create a 2/2 black rogue creature. If it was a land card, create a treasure token, otherwise gain 3 life. Writ of Return. It's a 5 mana sorcery. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and it has Cipher. Wow, very cool. Life Insurance, great art. 5 mana for an enchantment, Extort. And whenever a non-token creature dies, you lose 1 life and create a treasure token. That is bonkers. That is bonkers. Obscura Confluence. It's a 4 mana instant. You may choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Until end of turn, target creature loses all abilities and has base power and toughness 1/1. Target creature convenes, and target player returns a creature card from their graveyard to the hand. This is probably my favorite of all the Confluence cards. We have Oscar Rubbish Reclaimer. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each different mana value amongst cards in your graveyards. Whenever you discard a non-land card, you may cast it from your graveyard. And then we have a Currency Converter. It's 1 mana for an artifact, and whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. You may pay 2 and tap this to draw a card and discard a card, or you may tap this to put card exiled with Currency Converter into your graveyard. If it's a land card, create a treasure. If it's a non-land, create a 2/2 black rogue. We have Archon of Coronation. It's a 6 mana 5/5 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. As long as you're the monarch, damage does not cause you to lose life. An offer you can't refuse. Counter target long creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. Interesting. I don't know if I like that very much, but it is quite interesting. Obscura Charm. 3 mana, choose 1. Return target multi-carded permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Counter target instant or sorcery spell, or destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. Okay, so if I was to pick which decks I really like, I think there are a few that are very different. I think my favorite one out of the sets is going to be the Obscura card. I think this is going to have some of the more high value cards in it, but it's also playing some really interesting effects, a lot of political cards. It's not going to be the easiest of all of these to play, but it I think has some really nice upgrade paths, and it will probably be one that I don't actually play very many of these colors in this combination, but I can see myself playing this deck. So I'm going to rate this one my favorite, followed very closely with the Cabaretti. I think there's some nice support in this deck. I think it's built really well. I think actually the Cabaretti and the Brokers are going to enter the second slot, coming second, and that is because both of these I believe will be really nice and easy for new players to play. They have very simple synergies. They have lots of support in terms of other cards existing in Magic, so upgrades will look quite nice, and there's enough different cards that you can upgrade here, then I'm pretty sure we're going to see lots of different variations of these decks, where this I think is going to be more niche, and the kind of decks are going to look kind of similar. Third, I'm going to put the Riveteers, and for me, the Maestros come in last. So yes, this has been actually a really, really good set. Overall, I think, you know, if I was starting from scratch again, just having, you know, one of each puts you into a very different, they each have like very different themes of what they want to do. They have very nice support packages in terms of good artifacts and reprints. There is a few nice lands that have been reprinted with the filter lands, and so yes, I think I'm really, really happy with what Magic has done with these 5 decks. Now, disclaimer, all of these are more expensive than they were before, and I think they're going to stay that way. And so to kind of not have a terrible taste in everyone's mouth, each one of these has come with a collector's booster sample pack. And so let's open up these to see if, you know, the extra costs that are going to be coming with these decks warrants the sort of cost that we'll be paying for them. Because I think this is going to be an interesting thing, just getting a few interesting new cards. So let's open these. I'm going to pack all of this away and we can look at these. Alright, now let's dig into these collector booster sample packs. Now we have 5 of them, one for each deck, and I don't think that these are specific to those decks, so you could be cracking this open and getting something that wouldn't really suit your deck, but that's fine, because I'm pretty sure whatever's in here is going to be worth trading. So let's dig into these and see what these look like. Now these are only samples, so this is not a full collector's booster for those that have been lucky enough to open one of those. Let's see what we're going to get. Okay, so we get a little token. The first card here is Depopulate. So 4 mana sorcery. Each player who controls a multicolored creature card draws a card, then destroy all creatures. And then we have a Maestros charm, and it does not have any foiling treatment, although it kind of looks like it. So it's just the really nice. Sorry, it is a foil. This is a foil, but you can't really tell. Only the words at the bottom here gave it away for me. So it's not a brilliant foil, and it's not like textured or anything like that, so it's flat. Quite a cool card. I like that artwork, the Art Deco style. Right, so that's one down. Let's open this one. What are we going to get in this one? That's really frustrating. Alright, the token. We have Wildspread Thieving. It's a 3 mana enchantment with Hideaway 5, and whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a treasure token. Then you may pay 5, and if you do, you may play the exile card without paying its mana cost. And we get the Obscura charm in the same sort of finish. It is also a foil. Okay, now I'm starting to think that, well, we'll see. If there's a charm per pack, then they were probably purposefully put there. And perhaps they were specifically designed for the decks. So let's see. Token. Ooh, maybe not. Unlicensed Hearse. We have a 2-mannered vehicle with tap to exile two target cards from a single graveyard, unlicensed host power and toughness equal to the number of cards exiled with it. Very powerful, I think, over time. Full art, and then we have also a foil, and this is the uncommon Lagrella the Magpie, 3 mana. When Lagrella the Magpie enters the battlefield, exile any number of other target creatures controlled by different players until Lagrella leaves the battlefield. When an exiled card enters the battlefield under your control, put 2 1/1 counters on it. Very cool. I was starting to get worried to see, but these are probably set up for those decks. Still could be, we'll see. Let's put this aside, and we have Jetma's Garden. Alright, these are quite nice. These are like the new triomes. So add 3 colors and it enters the battlefield tapped. And we have the Rakish Revelers, and you can see these would fit in the same deck, right? When the Rakish Revelers enter the battlefield, create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. Then you may pay 2, and you may exile this card from your hand. Target land gains, add your green, red, and white, and until Rakish Revelers is cast from exile, you may cast Rakish Revelers for as long as it remains exiled. Quite a mouthful there. Okay, so I'm starting to think that you can see we have pretty much for all the different types. So I'm pretty sure that these were crafted for the decks so that you get not only two cards, but 2 cards that you could use in that deck. What 2 cards though, I'm guessing is going to be randomized amongst all the ones that could fit. Let's check it out. Interesting. Maybe I was misled again. Here we have Ognus the Dragon's Lash. It's 4 mana 3/3 haste. Whenever a creature you control with haste attacks, create a tapped treasure token. And we have the Glamorous Outlaw. It's for 6 mana, sorry. It's 4/5. And when Glamorous Outlaw enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you get to scry 2. You get to pay 2 to exile this from your hand, and target land gains, add blue, black, or red until the Glamorous Outlaw is cast from exile. You may cast Glamorous Exile for as long as it remains exiled. Alright. And that's sort of what you're going to get in these collector's boosters. Lots of special treatment cards with full art, alternative art, or these special framing. So yes, very excited. You can answer me in the comments below. Does these cards justify the extra cost that's going to be coming with these products? Now, it's not just the Commander products that are going to be increasing. Wizard has made an announcement that across the board they'll be increasing products by about 11% this year, including these products here. It's really cool. Extra treatment cards, adds a little bit of bling to your deck. And I thought that there was like some sort of sculpting going on, but as we quickly learned, some of the colors didn't match up, and so it's kind of random. Anyways, that's that. This has been the streets of New Capenna. I have a few other booster boxes that we'll be able to open and just go through some of those cards. I'm very excited for the set. And so thanks for sticking around and going through it with me. Bye.